Welcome to Learning Horizons, a series dedicated to reimagining learning, communicating, and collaborating in remote and hybrid workplace. What is possible? What could be done differently to ignite creativity and performance? I am Gail Watson, Director of Think Skills, and today I'm very happy to welcome Florence Dambricourt, a longtime friend and fellow French national whose work on self-leadership is inspiring. I really like Florence's insatiable curiosity, but also how she brings to her work elements from a whole range of areas such as music, sports, art, and she is the author of Swim Like a Fish, an easy guide to developing self-leadership. Welcome, Florence, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Gail, and thanks a lot for the invitation. Very excited to be here today.
That is a pleasure. Florence, just maybe to get started, would you like to share with us your journey into self-leadership? What brought you there? Maybe in a couple of minutes, because we've got a lot to cover. We're just talking about it.
Get me there. That's the right questions. I have no idea what gets me there. I just know that I'm really fascinated by the power we have into influencing our behavior and into looking at what's happening around us, that we can connect better with our system and communicate better. Maybe communication is what gets me there. Funny enough, it could be also the fact that from day one of my professional life, I worked a lot remotely. And that maybe has triggered a lot of thinking about how do we show up at work? How do we connect with people? How do we build up a social network when it's not coming from work? And what self-leadership does that require from us? Could be a lot of different things.
That is fascinating. But I like the fact that you've mentioned straight away that you've always worked remotely. Which is quite topical today in 2025, where there is a massive debate between back to the office full time, flexibility, what the right balance. And that is why we are talking about self-leadership and self-awareness, because the digital workplace is different and sends different type of signal and feedbacks, and the communication needs to be adapted. It's not that we reinvent the wheel, but, and we're talking about the basics offline a moment ago. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. However, we need to adapt as well to the medium and how it affects others and how they receive the communication. But before we dig into those technicalities, how would you define self-awareness, Florence?
I think I see two levels at least when we talk about self-awareness. First is how I feel about something, what I feel inside, what's happening when something is happening. So self-awareness of what's happening around me, in me, sorry. And then there is a self-awareness about how I react to something. So it's more a self-awareness that is more oriented toward the outside. Mm-hmm. We sometimes use actually two wording. We talked about downtime and uptime. Downtime, it's when we look inside, what's happening there. And uptime is when we looked outside, what do I see outside and what I'm going to respond to that. So I would be really thinking about these two levels.
Brilliant. Okay, so there is absolutely our perceptions of our own emotions, yeah, and our perceptions of the environment and how we influence this environment. So that is very interesting. Now, how this self-awareness can be influenced negatively or positively when we work digitally. So when we seldomly, I would say, turn up in person to our workplace.
I like, because actually when you say what is self-awareness, I realized I did not really reply what it was, more like how it's manifest. So I'm going to stay with that, because sometimes it's not about knowing what something is, it's more about knowing how we demonstrate it and what that is creating. So in a workplace, the digital workplace, there is a lot of things where we can positively influence it. For example, the fact that I can easily connect with people at 5,000 miles from me, the fact that we can have that easy conversation, we can see each other, that's extremely positive in terms of helping self-awareness, because I see you, I can use a lot of visual, I see from what is happening in our conversation, you can see me, I can hear your voice. So it's completely different than if we were only having a conversation through chat messages. At the same time, the fact that we do that creates something very surprising from a self-awareness perspective, because I am with you and at the same time, I am not with you. And that is happening with every tool we have. It happens also when we simply do a chat. Like I'm fun about using WhatsApp because I love the intense immediacy of the message with people. And what I love with WhatsApp is it allows me to be part of the daily life of people very close to me, even though I'm very far away. But I know it creates something very specific in terms of self-awareness, is I am here and at the same time, I'm not here. So this means that sometime I'm going to be here with the people thousands miles away because I text with them. But when I do that, I project myself with them. So I'm not here anymore in my present. And I'm sure you've experienced that sometime when you're, for example, going to dinner with someone and you're having a great conversation and the person picked the phone because something come up and the person replied to the phone. And for that moment of reply to the phone, the person is no longer with you. Physically here, but no longer with you. So we created this interesting dynamic that allow us to be somewhere and not be somewhere, to be in the moment and not be in the moment. And that's really, for me, connects strongly with self-awareness, because as long as I know where I am or to where I address my attention, then I can manage all these different phenomena.
That is fascinating, because I love the dichotomy of you know, I'm in a geographical space, but I'm actually connecting with someone in a different geographical space. I personally, being specialized in virtual classroom training and facilitations for a long time now. So we there's something we used to do before COVID and that we no longer do, is that on the first sessions, there will be a time for connection when we oriented people in the room, and we actually take the time to also address how people are. And we were making an emphasis about it. And I think that's something that, with the accessibility of the tools, the fact that since 2020, everybody has used MS Teams, Zoom, there is no more times to get on board a meeting, right? We just jump in. And it feels like there is a little bit of a blind spot there, because we don't know. I mean, out of a few people, even if it's just two, out of, you know, you and I call a meeting, and then, you know, it's something very important. I've got no idea what's happened to you, like even 10 seconds before you join the meeting.
Exactly. And we see that not only in meeting, we see that also on how we connect. I'm part of a sports committee, and I realized this morning I sent a few WhatsApp to people, and I was straight to the point on asking a few things without realizing that we had about 7 days already we've been talking together, and a lot of things may have changed. So sometimes we have to remember to slow down and actually exactly do online exactly the same thing we were going to do offline. That's mean if I go into a meeting room to get a meeting with people, the first thing I do is I say hi to everyone. I usually sit, or I go maybe to get a drink, or maybe I bring a coffee. But I will take that moment to see, is everybody okay? Is everybody ready to speak? Can we start and kick on the meeting? And usually it gave us these 5 minutes. Now, how come when we're online, we go straight to the point and we forget that We're supposed to be human beings. We're still supposed to be polite. We're still supposed to have mechanism to welcome each other. So there's something I often think of when it comes to technology. And we can apply that with AI, and sometimes I simply apply that with elevator in an airport. Because an elevator in an airport for me is fantastic. And the working mat, for me, I love that. It's like a game when I go on there, because when I go on them, I can work at the same time that the mat is moving forward. And I feel like I'm with this, it's, you know, in French, the les bottes de 7 lieues. And I can't remember how we say that in English, but these magic boots that allow me to go way faster. So I've got this very nice feeling. And for me, an elevator, a mat like that is a tool that is not here to replace me or do the job for me, but is here to help me to do it faster or in an easy way. And sometimes I think we forget this notion about easy, about making things easier and turning into becoming lazier. Because digital, for me, they're amazing. I remember the first job I had, we were doing everything with the phone. We never saw anybody. Or we were just barely doing email because it was just the early stages. Now we have this flexibility to be able to see people, to be able to connect very easily. We can do that from a small smartphone where we are on the move. We can do that in a nice location, like both of you, we are in our home office today. So we make it way easier. How come that is inviting us to become lazier about it? That would be really an interesting question for me. And here I will definitely bring the self-awareness. Once you start to be aware of the mechanism we go too much in, we can bring some kind of idea or solution or perspective.
You're right. I mean, lazier potentially, but I would like to maybe also look back to the time constraints.
Yeah.
I mean, there is a culture more and more in the corporate workplace that we have to do more with less, and time is one of the resources that's being squeezed. So if you are supposed to squeeze 4 meetings in 1 hour, chances are you are going to focus on, you know,
to the point.
Going to the point.
Yeah.
Is it like, you know, what does it say about the culture there?
We got in a culture of, for me, we are in a culture of urgency. Mm-hmm. Everything has to be urgent. Everything has to be happening now. And I disagree with that. We're still in a culture where we can have priority, but it seems like people do no longer take the time to set this priority. It's actually interesting because a lot of the work I do with teams is create the space for them to reset their priority, that they create time, that they can become more strategic, for example, on how they use their meeting, or how they show up at work, or how they just demonstrate leadership when they work with other teams. So I'm not sure where this sense of urgency is coming all the time. I have that strong belief that it's going to bring us straight into the wall, and that we need to actually pause and step back.
That's very interesting what you say, Florence, because it's actually something I experienced with a lot of my mentees and coaches as well. They come because they need a space to think and set a strategy and reflect on what's happening in their teams, how they want to be seen and how they want to manage situation. So it's almost our role seems to be just to hold that space, to hold an hour and a half, whatever time is it, to actually help people to reflect and think, which I remember, you know, my parents, my grandparents, they was dedicated, like, you know, the day was very structured, but there was a moment when nothing was happening. It was okay to be bored. It was okay to have nothing going on. And that time was, you know, that times could remember my dad sitting with his newspaper. It could have been upside down because he was absolutely not looking at the newspaper. He was thinking about something that was bothering him or not bothering him, something he wanted to solve.
There is a lot of surprising habits we've taken in the past few years, I can tell that. And I saw clear acceleration with COVID or after COVID. I was talking with an executive I'm coaching, and she was saying, like, my calendar is booked. I'm still going to have people booking time again on that calendar. So it's like they're expecting her to already have a clone that she can attend 3 or 4 meetings at the same time. Completely okay, but technology is not there yet. And when technology is going to be there, I'm still not sure this is going to be the answer. They could expect her to delegate more work, but still not. It has to be her. So there is this kind of double binding we're creating all the time. So when it comes to, if we go back to the subject of self-awareness, that can really help us to do that, I will highlight 5 dimensions that I find really interesting. The notion of authenticity, the notion of attention, where do I spend my attention? The notion of time management, how do I manage my time? And how do I manage my boundaries versus my time? The notion of my energy, also, how do I use my energy? Do I use it to really create something, or just like to get everything going along? And the last things would be, how do I influence my behavior? Because we have this system, and this is something that's very interesting, is a lot of our behavior are in response to what is happening in our system. So if we have a system that is in a sense of urgency all the time, it's going to invite us all the time to be in a sense of urgency. So to be able to stop that, we're going to have to embrace the full discomfort of, I step away from something that's supposed to, that looks like the norm. So I have to embrace that type of discomfort. And then I need to replace it for something else that is going to be more constructive. But I'm still going to have that system that's going to ask me something that is not working for me. So I'm going to have to find a way to also modify the system. And that is only going to happen if we start to be really strict with some rule we give ourselves. So for example, I know someone to avail of some of that time challenge. Clearly, the calendar, that person calendar has booked 2 hours every morning. And that person has an auto-reply email saying that I do not reply to email from that time to that time because I'm working on X, Y, Z. Thank you for your patience. Now she's really strict about it. So that helps. So there is really this notion that's completely connected to self-awareness. Once we're aware of something, how do we commit to making it different? I'm going also to go back to meetings, because something really interesting, and it's not only meeting, it's not only the visual we have, it's the full set of the digital tool. Email, we are sending way more email than we need to. Also because we are in this sense of urgency. I see an email, up, I reply straight ahead, and I forget sometimes to pause and see what is really asking that email. If I read the full email rather than the top line, do I get the information I'm looking for? And rather than sending it an email, is it not easier to pick up the phone and call the person? Or is it not easier, if I am on site, to stand up and just reach out to the desk on the side and ask the same question? So we've got something really funny, because people schedule time with you all the time to talk to you, book your calendar all the time. And at the same time, very rarely, they just pick up the phone to give you a simple phone call.
That's very interesting, because I think that stretch on culture as well. What do we feel culturally because of our, I would say, national culture? Both of us is French, but you live in Switzerland, I live in England. And what is we feel is acceptable in a different culture. I remember working in an open plan in the city many moons ago. And already you had the more senior people commenting on the fact that the young generation wasn't going to walk out and ask someone. But there was this constant fear of interrupting and being told off for interrupting. So there was like this mixed messages about, oh yes, you should do it. However,
don't do it.
Don't do it. Yes.
And that brings us nicely to self-awareness. Self-awareness for me is extremely tied up to self-leadership because it's one of the big components. And maybe we could even say that self-leadership is all about the self-awareness of how we receive what is happening around us and how we decide to react to it. But what I like in self-leadership is we move to proactive, or to be intentional about how we react. So a lot of the self-awareness on the situation, in a lot of cases, we can take self-awareness as something more passive. Something is happening and I feel it, I see it, I hear it, and I react to it. Or we can start to think about self-awareness as something way more active. Okay, what intention, what focus do I put to create something, and how am I aware of the impact that myself can play? And in this case, sometimes we're even going to talk about that notion of using the self as an instrument. When I go to a remote meeting and I see half of the people are not turning up their camera, I'm always curious about what do they want to project by not turning up their camera. And if they were to meet with me in person in a room, would they come up with like big dark sunglasses and a hat and something that make it impossible for me to know where they are? So they may have an image of 5 Inspector Gadgets coming up into the room, all with the same mask. They would not, because they would be here and they would, of course, have to come looking who they are. They would have no other choice. Now, when we have a choice, what time do we take the choice that we know creates the least positive impact? So sometimes we're clear, like yesterday, I went to a meeting and I was very clear. I said, for the 5 first minutes, I won't put my camera on because I'm moving, I'm working. And I know some people are dizzy when you walk at the same time and you hold your camera like this. That's fine. Once then you're in the right position, you do it. So it's a lot of things. It's really about what intention we want to create. Yeah.
Thank you. So many things to unpick about what you've just said in the past, in the past few minutes. I'm very interested about the fact that you say that self-awareness is something active. You talked about what we project, how we're seen and how we make other people feel. That is an active, intentional. I love the word intentional, which means that we have actually spent time reflecting on our intention. So that intention is, yes, how my way of being, my camera being on or off, my audio being good or difficult, and being French and speaking mostly English, I'm very aware that I talk very fast with a French accent, which can actually affect someone, especially in the digital world where I'm in control of my setup. It's a decent setup with good quality equipment, but the person receiving it may be in a loud environment or in a car or something where it makes the accent worse. So it makes the audio worse. And it's not my intention, but I need to kind of be aware that is potentially what could happen. And another thing that I've really noted is the boundaries, the setting up of boundaries. And I would say that probably lend itself to a whole entire session, but it's saying no and how we say no to things in a way that is not offensive or acceptable, depending on the context, if we manage up or down.
Strategic as well. A no is a very strategic answer on a regular basis. And there is soft no, which could be yes, but not now. Or yes, and we do that later. So there is kind of a soft no. But it's also in the sense of boundaries. For example, if you're a manager and you have a team, and thank you for the reminder to speak slowly. If you're a manager and you have a team, for example, I'm going to ask you, you probably have rules for when you meet in person or for when you're on site together. Are you respecting these rules when you are connected remotely? Is there something that you need to add for when you connect remotely? to make sure that people feel they got the best out of the tool. So if I come back to that notion of self-awareness, you know, and you said at the beginning, connected remotely is not the same. I completely agree. Connected remotely is not the same. Yes. And that is for me the first level of self-awareness. We realize that we do not interact at all the same way when we connect remotely. At the same time, the intention I'm going to put in how I engage with the person when I connect remotely, for me, is exactly the same than if I was seeing the person in person. So at some level, it's exactly the same than before. Just the tool is a different approach. Now, there is something else that is interesting that is surfacing, is how we actually create a world of dichotomy. And so often I hear, oh, it's like remote working or working at home. It's good communication or bad communication, maybe. It's urgent or taking your time. While the and could actually bring something completely different. The O is inviting us to see things as opposing, and it's kind of pulling into different direction. When you start to think about this as and, we start to see that they can be complementarity, and therefore they can help us to go to another direction or a different direction or a level up. We sometimes will say a level up. Urgent, like for example, short term or long term. No, it's short term and long term. Your short term goal should feed your long term goal. And they're going to be slightly different. They're going to be expressed slightly different, but they should feed. And if we do and, then we start to create something that is much more interesting. So it's the same thing in terms of our self-awareness. Very often, it's an and that we have to integrate, and that we can see how we can maybe go beyond the initial challenges we're facing because we have something slightly different than we've been using until now.
That is such a good reflection on the use of or and whom. How are you going to say that? But yes, it's a contrast, but it's a contrast that can be, I would say, like you said, complementary or opposite, creating opposition or complementarity. So that is absolutely essential to see how in the digital space, and we're touching on it, we need to establish the rules for a team to agree on the etiquettes for meetings, for when, and be able to verbalize some elements of, as you exemplified, you know, I will not turn on my webcam, even though it's expected, because I'm on the move, I'm on the car, you know, I don't know, something is happening in my life, and I will do it. But and also self-awareness, I will contribute in such and such a way, so it's add to the conversation and doesn't distract from it. So it's taking the time to construct our thought and express them, so we connect and create an environment of trust with everybody else who is part of the conversation.
And it's beautiful you bring that notion of trust, because we know trust within the conversation is an element of psychological safety. And we know that this is an element of really creating thriving workplaces. So all that elements just have to, they're like different pieces of the puzzle that need to be brought together. And it's a 3D dimension puzzle. It's not a linear one. So we really have to kind of look at that puzzle from the systemic perspective.
Florence, it was a fascinating conversation. There is so much more to unpack to it, not to impact, sorry, to unpack onto it. But unfortunately, we are running out of time. But if you had one advice to give to people listening to this webcast, what, in terms of self-awareness, what would it be?
Okay, an easy one to implement, and it's really fun. When you go on a video like that, check your camera when you put it on, make sure you're in the right good location, and then turn off your self-view. Like that, you will only focus on the people working with you. Exactly as if you were onto a meeting where you never have a mirror in front of you where you can check every 2 minutes, you know, do I look right? Do I look right? Just do that. Start exploring by doing this. Make it a habit within your teams. It does change something.
That is such a good advice. Thank you so much, Florence. Oh, and I've got one last question, Florence. What do you think would be essential for you to develop in this forever changing world of digital and AI? What is something you've put your intention to develop in the coming months, years, something you would like to grow?
Intention to develop for myself,
Yes,
or for the
for
service of the
yourself.
community.
For yourself, or, you know, in your role, in your professional role.
For myself. Always about improving the value of the communication. Exactly as you said, we actually do not own the result of our communication. It is owned by the people that receive it. And the more we facilitate their understanding, the stronger it is. And for me, there is always something here that is interesting to look at.
Thank you so much, Florence. It was a very insightful conversations where we touch on a lot. Really like would like to point out again on the reflection around intentionality and boundaries and how we can set it all up and how we communicate about it. It's something very personal, so there is no one fit all. There is no magical recipe. It's really how we interiorize it, interpret it, and use it in the unique context of our teams. Thank you once again, Florence, for your time. I'll post a link to your book and potentially to some of the models that we've got discussed and you've talked us through. They will be on the Think Skills webpage. They're going to be linked that are going to be available. Thank you so much, Florence.
Thank you, Gail.
Bye-bye.